I'm Rachelle Archer, and you're listening to The Artful Leader. Hello, hello. Welcome back to The Artful Leader. I'm super excited because this is the beginning of season 3, and that kind of feels substantial to me. Like, hey, this is a thing. It's been moving forward, and we've been chatting with so many cool people. And today I'm really excited to have Alicia Peterson Baskel here with me. Woohoo! Woohoo. Thank you for saying yes. To just having a conversation. And I want to start by just giving a little context of how we met, because I think it's kind of a unique place. Probably in the spring of 2021, my friend Kat at Transcendence had just moved into her beautiful new dance space in Lemon Grove and was like, offering all these, looking at offering programs for young people. And she was like, how cool would it be if we had our own practice for us to come? And she was like, I have this amazing guy, Eric Geiger, who wants to teach. And so we just started putting the word out. And this incredible dance community has come together, and we've been meeting for over a year and a half now on Wednesday mornings with this incredible guide. And I'm just going to give a little shout out to Eric Geiger right now. I know you listen sometimes, Eric. We love you. I'm trying to get him on here too. But it's just been this beautiful place where all these creatives and educators and healers and people of all experience levels and age ranges and body types and genders, and like there's just it's just this beautiful community where we're learning to move together in these really unique ways. I don't have like a strong dance background, which I know is different from you, and we'll get into that a little bit, but it's just one of those communities that I'm finding like you could just turn around and point to anybody in the space, and every person there is involved in some amazing thing. Like they're an educator, they're working with young people, they're a massage therapist, they're a somatic experiencing person, they're a choreographer, and it's just been so cool to be in that community and be surrounded by that kind of, I don't know, those kind of people has just been really powerful for me. And I was thinking about like one of the first days that I was there, and we did this whole dance practice on like shaking for like an hour and a half. And we got like totally high from just like shaking our bodies and the incredible like music that Eric puts on. And I remember leaving there, and I like rolled down the windows in my car, and I was like screaming like out the windows of my car, just like, this is how I want to live my life, because before I had been like working at this school, and I never had the time to go do a dance class on Wednesday mornings. And I was just so excited to be able to be in that kind of community. So that's kind of the context where Alicia and I met. And as we've sort of danced and moved and gotten acquainted, I've started to find out some of the things that you do, in the world, in the community, and my ears kind of perked up, and I was like, I want to talk to you. So I'm really glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here too, Rachelle. I love what you're doing and who you're talking with and the support you're giving this community.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I think there are some little places where you and I intersect, and I would love to hear a little bit. Why don't we just start with you sharing a little bit about who you are and your background and what's alive for you right now?
Yeah, yes, I'm a dance artist is where I would like really put my foot, in the sand. That's who I am. I'm a dance artist at heart. I have my my master's in fine arts in dance theater. It's just that's not how I know Eric, but that's one of the places that I am connected with Eric through. He was one of the professors as I was going through that program 11, 12 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's such a beautiful space of dance, because sometimes you can think of dance or a dance class. And I know people get intimidated, that idea of moving and dancing and being judged And it's so the opposite of
Yeah.
not that class that we're talking about, but also just the kind of dance that I love and that I love to
Mhm.
embody. So I come from that space. That's kind of where I come from in everything that I do. I
Mhm.
also write, and
Mhm.
I also love talking about creative things and have my podcast where we talk about
Yeah.
the creative process. And most recently, I started teaching breathwork as a way to access that kind of spirit in us that supports our creativity, that can let us really tap into our intuition.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it so much. And, to go back to what you were saying about like different experiences with dance spaces, I think I really discovered after becoming a raver in the
Mm.
90s that I love dance,
Yeah.
but I didn't always want to be in that club environment. And so I was seeking out like places where I could dance. And I remember, studying some modern dance or things like that at City College and ending up like trying to audition for some Gene Isaacs thing at UCSD and getting completely freaked out, like by the audition process and all of that. And I totally shied away from that world. And it has been, and so I went on to be an expressive arts therapist and do more like authentic movement and contact improv and a lot of just playback theater and things that are a lot more improvisational. And it's just been so wonderful to kind of come at dance from this other way of really honoring the different bodies that are in the space, the different experiences they're having, what each person contributes to that, and how to lead those spaces as a guide rather than like, this is how it has to look. And so that's
Yeah.
been really liberating for me.
Yeah.
Um,
I've been teaching a choreography class recently, off and on, with San Diego Dance Theater. And it's just been beautiful seeing the people come in. And a lot of times when you hear you're taking a choreography class, people wonder, am I going to
yeah.
learn how to put steps together so that I can make
Mhm.
a completely solid dance that I can repeat over and over and over again? And what they get with me is like, let's just tear this box open. Let's look at what choreography is. Let's look at how we, thinking about leadership. If we're
Mhm.
creating a dance on other people, not
Yeah.
just on ourselves, how are we supporting the people that we're working with? How are we supporting them? Whether we're teaching them specific steps or
Mhm.
we're empowering them. This is how I like to work,
Mhm.
empowering dance artists or theater artists or whoever I'm working with to
Mhm.
bring themselves to the space
Yeah.
and to find a way to make a dance together and to choreograph this thing that might be almost fully improvisational,
Yeah.
or it might be fully set.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That's so exciting. I love it. And one of the things we talk a lot about in expressive arts is kind of like having this sense of like, what is the image or the message or whatever that we're embodying, so that it's really coming from within rather than some prescribed thing. And so I really feel aligned and appreciate that. Um, but something that I hear you talking a little bit about and that was in your bio that you sent me was just this notion of the breath being the starting place for intuition and creativity. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. A lot of the folks that I work with, when we talk about breath work, it's kind of part of like, I do different modules with leaders and organizations and teams, and we always start with this individual wellness and like, how do we build awareness about what's going on in our nervous system, what are our stress levels, what's happening within our body so that we can take care of ourselves and also begin to sense what's happening with other people. But I had never really looked at it with the creative lens. And I feel like creativity is a huge part of, I don't know, taking full care of ourselves and expressing ourselves fully in the world and showing up authentically and stuff. So I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts
Yes.
about that. I love it. Yeah, I feel like, there are a lot of different ways that breath work has supported me. But I mean, going
Mhm,
back to when I was making work postgraduate school, I've been a meditator for ages.
mhm,
And I always kind of wanted to start rehearsals with a meditation, but it never was quite what the
mhm,
group needed. We
mhm.
we needed something else. We
Yeah.
needed that time. And so what we would talk about, a lot of what I did was improvisational. And what we would talk about was, okay, it's just going to take us like 20 minutes and just to get into the middle of it. And we create ideas of what if we could get into this improvisation and start from the middle. And that was always a challenge.
Mm.
Found since practicing breath work is that that is possible now for me,
Mm.
is that some of those layers that we have to shed, or that at least I can speak for myself, that I have to shed before I feel like I'm fully present in an improvisation, are already shed through breath work.
Mm.
And the kind of breath work that I practice, and they all come from, pranayama, from
Right.
the yogic tradition, of
Yeah.
course, but there are a lot of different avenues that it has gone, in different ways.
Yeah.
And the way that I practice it, it is a rhythmic breathing practice that lasts usually, I mean, the way the classes that I do are 20 to 30 minutes of breathing. And so
Mhm.
you're really working, you're in that deep, deep
Yeah.
meditation, this active meditation for a while, and
Mhm.
building that muscle kind of,
Mhm.
in you. And what happens is then that oxygenated blood, as you're breathing, goes to the hypothalamus, releases endorphins, and we're able to relax our mind. We're able
Mhm.
to shed from our body through our breath some of those layers,
Mhm.
right? We just can let go of some of those old emotions, the stress,
Yeah.
uh, judgment,
Yeah.
and maybe step back from some of these things that have been shouting at us so
Mhm.
loudly, or that we maybe didn't even realize were guiding us through our choice making,
Yeah.
through old habits.
Mhm.
And with that little bit of space, then we can make room for our own intuition,
Mhm.
hearing our own voice,
Yeah.
allowing our own creativity to come up, and then
Mhm.
follow it. And with improvisation, it feels like such a natural space, because
Yeah.
all you're doing is following it,
Yeah.
right? You're just practicing what is my body? Where am I now? Where am I now? Where am I now?
Yeah. 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 And what I'm hearing you describe feels to me like really building a practice of presence, like
Yeah,
really kind of like letting go of whatever was, whatever is coming, and being fully here in our body, in our heart, in our mind, like present.
yeah.
And that is such a powerful practice for whether you're making dance or whether you're leading a team meeting, whatever you're doing, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you tell somebody you should practice presence, like that's not always so easy, right?
Yeah, what is
How,
that supposed to mean?
what does
Yeah.
that even mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
how do I do that? What are you talking about? Oh, I'm looking
Yeah.
around me. But
Mm,
when you're given a task, when you're in that breath work and you're allowing that part of your mind that's going to start judging and questioning to be activated, to be active in a process, right?
mhm,
You're having to breathe. The breath is a three-part breath, two breaths
mhm.
in, one through your belly, one up to your chest, and then exhaling out. And it's all done through your mouth. And you got to concentrate on that,
Yeah.
right? So then your brain's occupied,
Yeah.
and your body can really release and relax and be present
Mhm.
and start to
Yeah.
notice presence.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's so powerful because just like you said, we tell people like, practice being present. And a lot of people say the same thing when I talk to them. They're like, well, I've tried meditation and I can't like stop thinking and it's like, well, that's not the point. Right. But I think that breath and breath work and breath exercises and stuff can be such a fantastic way into that, because like you said, you're giving your mind something to work on while staying totally present. And that is just so important, and that helps us just to be totally aware of what's happening here, just noticing it, no judgment, and just all of that is so powerful. um yeah, and I think when I think about so many of the folks that I'm working with who, they have so many decisions that they have to make, and there's so many pressures on them, to run a team, to teach a class, to, make these big decisions and stuff. And I think a lot of times there's this pressure that we have in our culture to like go, 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 and we have to do things now. How do you think that these kinds of practices can serve people in the moment or in the way that they structure their day? Like, I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two parts to breath
Mm,
work.
mhm.
There's number one, there's having some kind of a practice.
Yeah.
And for some people, it can be just doing a breath work session or some kind of embodied practice once a month.
Mhm.
Because what happens is because you've released so many of those emotions, if you've released those emotions, if you've released some of that stress,
Mhm.
then you don't have to do that breath work right before you go into the meeting. You don't
Yeah.
have to do that breath work right before you are going into some pressure
Mhm.
situation. You've already established a baseline
Yeah.
of calm.
Mhm.
And so whether it's once a month, once a week, every day,
Mm.
everybody's going to be different.
Yeah.
But if you can make a little time for that, I remember
Mhm.
my meditation teacher really kind of drilling this into us 20
Mhm.
years ago, that you don't have time to not do it,
Yeah.
because all of that stress, all of that anxiety that can come up, or even just, mild pressure
Yeah.
that can come up when you're in situations where you have to be the leader, where you have to make split decisions, or even, big long-term decisions.
Yeah.
When you're grounded and you can have that separation from what you feel from your intuition and what others are telling you or what you think you have to do, when you
Yeah.
can separate those out, you can be really, really clear.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I really appreciate you talking about that. Like, there's sort of like our practice and the baseline that we build for ourselves, and then those little tools that we can tap into in moments where we're like, oops. Like, right, like,
Yeah.
oh, this, I might be kind of going into a spot where things are like, I know this is going to be intense, or I just experienced something pretty intense and I need to come back to ground zero. And I know for me, a lot of like, I've been practicing yoga for like 30 years, and I have my own daily practice, and I'm the kind of person that needs a daily practice.
Mhm.
Not everybody's like that. Like, I literally wake up, my alarm goes off, and the first thing I do is like breathe. And I roll out my mat and I do yoga and I journal and I read, and that's just what I need in order to set myself up. And then there are other times, like having worked with like, super high risk populations or really high stress teams or whatever, that helps me come back to that foundation that I've laid, where I can be like, oh yeah, this morning in my practice, this was the intention that I set, or this is like this practice that I've been in, and I can come back to that. But if you don't have that, like, I'd like to talk a little bit about what happens when we don't have it. Like, what do you know about that?
Oh my goodness, I haven't even thought about that lately because I just really like thinking about having it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you don't have some kind of practice to reduce at the very base minimum, to reduce your stress level,
Yeah.
that, people talk about it all the time. You're going to get sick. You're going to get
Yeah.
sick if you don't. And I mean, that's just, going from energy to the physical.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to get sick. Nobody wants to get
No.
sick. So having that little bit of just, just writing it down in your calendar, you're going to do that every morning or
once a week or
once
whenever.
a week or whenever, but
Yeah.
just knowing that like that commitment is to yourself. And I know that's also hard for people is making commitments to themselves. It's so much easier to commit to somebody else, right? Or to say like, oh, that's due over here for this other person. So I'm going to not do any of my things until I get that done for that other person. And it's too bad that we don't value ourselves more, or maybe we can try as a whole. I guess I shouldn't speak to that as a whole population because I know people are recognizing the importance of, putting their mask on first, like on the airplane when they talk about that. It's such a beautiful metaphor for how we can be, how we can fill ourselves up. I mean, it's cliche, but it's truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the other thing that I've been learning with these different practices that I work with is it doesn't necessarily have to take a long time.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Right. And I know we talked about, we'll do a little practice here together in a minute, and you'll be able to see like how much can shift just from a few minutes of, very deliberate practice of some of these things. It doesn't have to be like an hour every day of all this stuff. And the more you practice, sometimes the less time you need, because now you've got this baseline. It's like a muscle that's stronger and that, you can flex. But yeah, to that point of like, when we don't have that practice, like I want to go back to what you were saying about like the creative process. Like it took so much longer to get to that open space of being able to connect and improvise with others. And I think that, when we don't have those practices, we're also in a reactionary space a lot of times where we're just sort of like trying to deal with what's in front of us, what's behind, but what happened before, and we're all reacting rather than coming from a place of like really clear intention and being a creator in our life, whether that's like explicitly creative or just how we're showing up or what it is that we're doing in our work or our family or partnerships, whatever. And so I think that it's just all of the stuff we're talking about just helps us show up with so much more intention and clarity. That is like so freeing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes creating whatever you're creating so much more fun because it becomes more playful and more of a ride and more intentional. And then the surprises really delights. That they delight me when they come up, even when I'm editing something and I can see, oh, wow, I don't need this whole paragraph because I say it so well over here or over here. Just the delight of any part of the creative process when you're not judging yourself and worried about the things that we sometimes worry about in creation, then we can just enjoy the process.
Yeah. And that's something that I wanted to talk with you a little bit about as well, because I know you have this podcast that's really examining the creative process and talking to folks from all kinds of different disciplines. And I'm curious, like, what are some of the things that you're learning or that you're hearing from people across the board that are just some fun little gems from those conversations that you would love to share?
Yeah. I mean, they give all of the different artists from across so many genres give such great stories and advice. And, one of the biggest things is just that all of these artists are committed to their practice. They've made a commitment, which I could become like sacrifice. No, it's not sacrifice. They are committed to their practice. They're committed to their art form. They have set aside time, they've set aside space. I mean, that's one of the biggest, simplest parts of setting up a creative process is giving yourself the time and the space. And it seems totally obvious. And it honestly is totally obvious. It's just that people don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are
Yeah.
prioritizing something else. So when you've
Exactly.
committed to your process and committed to your desire to express that creativity that's inside of you, that we all have
Yeah.
inside of us, if you're committed to seeing it expressed into the world, then you do set aside the time and the space. And guess what? It's also healing, as we've
Yes.
mentioned in the beginning. It's also quite healing to not just create what you're going to create, but also share it in
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that those principles just carry across the board, like getting clear on what you're committed to and doing what it takes because you're just so in love with the result that you're creating, where it's like once you've had that experience of like bringing something beautiful into the world, whatever it is, right? It's like you believe in it, you want to make it happen, you want to do it more, and then you just go for it. And I feel like a lot of what we've been talking about already kind of like sets us up to be more likely to do those things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And to enjoy doing those things, because
Yeah.
I've seen a meme on social media over the years, about the creative
Mhm.
process. And there are times in the creative process when you're creating something and you feel like you're drudging this thing through the sand and the dirt and is it really worth it? But right? Because it goes,
Yeah.
it's an up and down roller coaster. But if
Yeah.
you can just ride it, like people love roller coasters, right? We love
Yeah.
it. They're
They pay a lot of
joyful.
money to
Exactly.
go.
So that like, when you hit those, what you think is a low, that challenge that's arising, it's a chance
Yeah.
to really dig into something and let something new show itself
Yeah.
and go maybe in a different direction than that you even thought you were going with
Yeah.
whatever you're doing with. I mean, I love that as a metaphor for life.
Yeah.
I always love practicing the creative process in art because I
Yeah.
feel like, okay, if I'm practicing that process, then I can also let that sift into my daily life when I find a disappointment or a challenge
Yeah.
and let myself ride it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the reason why I became an expressive arts therapist because I just was like, this is so valuable. And this isn't just over here doing art. It's really changing the way I respond to challenges or creative, um, when you're in a conundrum about where to go, or like learning how to play with materials, learning how to trust your own impulses, learning how to like follow the attractor, learning how to just build skills,
Mhm.
because practice does make perfect. Like, just a lot of those different things. So yeah, and I feel like for those who do not necessarily identify as creatives or artists, I feel like artists can be such an inspiration for us, and these creative processes can be such an inspiration that we can borrow from in our own lives with whatever it is that we want to create in our world. And so many of the folks that I know listen to the Artful Leader podcast are interacting in the community in all kinds of ways and have something to offer that might be creative, or they might not think of it as creative, but I do. Yeah. So I'm wondering if this would be a good time for us to take a moment to, maybe I would love to hear some of, like, you already kind of walked me through, like I was breathing while you were talking through it, what are some little breath exercises or meditations that people could do in the morning or could do on the way home from work, or there's so many different times where these things could become useful. What you
Yeah.
got?
Oh, what do I got? What do I got? So the breath that I taught you already, that I talked about, that's something that you want to use when you're just trying to like ignite something,
Mhm.
right? You're not going to use it when you're feeling stressed and you want to calm down.
Okay.
You're using that to ignite. So we're going to do maybe some to kind of bring calm
Okay.
now at this moment.
Okay.
And it's similar. I mean, we're going to take a deep breath in. One of the things that I've learned is that many of my clients have not taken a deep breath into their belly in
Yes.
maybe a very long time, maybe never. And
Right.
so just recognizing that belly space and taking just a deep breath in through your nose and imagining that you're filling up your belly like a balloon and then exhaling out. And it's really, really simple, but it's just directing that right down into your belly, letting that balloon expand. And as you exhale, you let the balloon just deflate. You're not pressing it. You're not trying to hold anything. We're just trying to relax. There are a lot of different practices that you can do, but right now we're just trying to calm our nervous system. So we can just do this. Let's do this for a little bit. Taking a deep breath in and letting your belly expand and releasing that breath also out through your nose, letting that balloon deflate. Nice. All the way down. You can feel it almost down into your pelvis. Taking another deep breath in and releasing out. And that's just at any time. You're driving in your car, you're sitting in front of your computer. If you find yourself breathing up into your chest, if you find yourself short of breath, if you find yourself sort of fluttering a bit with anxiousness, just dropping down into your belly, feeling that breath. And, maybe you connect with other parts of your body as well. That's one way. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something I wanted to mention because it came to mind for me. Because sometimes when I've talked to people there, and you mentioned it too, but there are ways we can breathe that can energize and invigorate us. And then there are ways that can calm us down. And that kind of has to do with like the ratio of like inhale and exhale and stuff, right? So it's like the calming breath is the one that has like the longer exhale, right? Because I remember when I worked with youth who were experiencing a lot of trauma or a lot of anxiety, people would be like, just take a deep breath. And these kids would be like holding their breath. They're inhaling like really deeply, but not exhaling. And then they would have panic attacks or different things like that because they weren't being really taught how to breathe. So I really appreciate that you made that distinction. I think it's important for people to understand that there are ways that we can breathe that can like warm our body up and get us invigorated and excited for what's next. And then there's other breaths that we want to take. And that long exhale is what tells our vagus nerve, which manages all of our stress response, to calm down. So I just wanted to say a little bit more about that. So the belly balloon breath is a great way to start, but it sounded like you wanted to say something.
Yeah. I mean, then there's another one that that's a little bit more it's just totally even. If you've heard of box breathing.
Yeah.
For people who want a system, right? It's a very clear system and it's pretty neutral.
Yeah.
Very calming, but it's quite neutral. It's a box, literally. You take a deep breath in for 4 counts. You hold that breath for 4 counts. You release for 4 counts. And then you hold that breath for 4 counts. And then you take a deep breath in for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold 1, 2, 3, 4. You release 2, 3, 4. And you hold 2, 3, 4. And then you can keep going with that same rotation. And it gets the brain out of whatever it was doing.
Yeah.
Which is a little different than the belly breath can. But this is a structure that takes your brain and gives it a task.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
I also wanted to say that with the breath work that I teach, and I'll teach you guys that one more time, that's invigorating. The other thing that it does, and then we talked about this, is that it brings up stuff, right? It's meant to help us clear out. So if you don't want to be doing that, when you don't want these things to come up, you don't want to be doing that in the safe space
Right.
in your home,
Mm-hmm.
lying down, because you
Mm-hmm.
can start to feel a little dizzy. If you're lying down,
Mm-hmm.
perfectly fine. But we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to use our breath in this type of breathwork healing process
Mm-hmm.
to release those
Yeah.
old emotions. And in order to release them, they have to come up.
Right. Yeah. And I love how you said that, because a lot of times I think folks are like, I'm going to cry, or I'm going to feel sad, or I'm going to feel angry or whatever. And it's like, great. Now you can flush it out.
Exactly.
That just because you felt it doesn't mean it's going to stay forever. And when you can use these kinds of like somatic practices that help move it through, you can start to loosen the grip of those things on your life.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And if you're in a safe space, if you feel safe enough to cry, right? If you feel safe enough to let go, to remember, possibly
Mhm.
remember something that you need to let go of,
Yeah.
feel something that you need to let go of, that you
Mhm.
want to let go of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those times when we do want to kind of bring that up and kind of,
Yeah.
what I know you mentioned it kind of in passing earlier,
Yeah.
but what was the breath that the pattern that we did there?
Yes. It's a three part breath.
Mm-hmm.
And in this process, we do it all with our mouth open. We use our mouth breathing for it. I don't recommend that. It's not the recommended way of breathing again in your daily life, but for
Right.
this purpose, we do
Mm-hmm.
that. You can also do it through your nose, and that's fine.
Okay.
But the breath is down into your belly, upper chest, exhale out, down into your belly, upper chest, exhale out. So it's almost like you've got a figure eight in your belly, and you're
Mhm.
filling up the bottom part first and the upper part with another breath, and then you let it out. So you don't let out that first breath. You keep it coming. You take that deep
Mhm.
breath into your belly, upper chest, exhale out, all of it.
Mm.
Yeah. And that rhythm, you start to find a rhythm with that. And you can feel that breath happening, not just in the front of your body, but all
Mhm.
around, because again, it's like that balloon that we talked about with the belly breathing.
Mhm.
You can fill it up there, fill up the chest, and exhale out. And the longer you go, the more expansion you can find. But
Right.
I recently read that in a study in Stanford University, where they
Mhm.
were looking at all kinds of meditation, they found that this breathing, they did it through the nose, but they did this
Mhm.
breathing for 5 minutes, I believe. And they felt like that gave people the strongest stress reduction for the longest period of time. I don't know, it's just one study, but I thought that
Mhm.
was pretty exciting. There are
Yeah.
so many tools that we can grab. And like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to take up so much of your day. For them,
Right.
they said doing breath work for that 5 minutes was amazing, really had
Mhm.
amazing results.
Mhm. Mhm. I love it. I love it. Um, and so I'm curious, like, where
Mhm.
can people learn more about this? What resources do you have that folks can tap into?
Yeah. David Elliott is my teacher, and he's the person who he's taught many people
Mhm.
this particular practice. And he has a couple of books out that you can find. And he also, I believe he does some recorded sessions
Mhm.
on Spotify.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you want to work with me, I do group sessions regularly.
Mhm.
And so it's on my link, there's always like whatever next is coming up, whenever the
Mhm.
next one's coming up. And I do some during the weekday mornings, and then I do one on a Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific time
Okay.
once a month. It's just
Okay.
once a month on that Saturday. And I also do one-on-ones, which I
Mhm.
love.
Mm.
It gives a person the chance to really speak to what they're working on,
Yeah.
speak out loud about it, speak out loud about what is happening, and then enter that breath and be held
Yeah.
by me and over
Yeah.
the computer. So this is the other
Yeah.
thing, is I do most of the work over Zoom, which I
Mhm.
think is just amazing because it really speaks to the the fact that this is a process that is yours. It belongs to you, it belongs to your body. All I do is hold space and guide.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that it's really interesting to think about like the one-on-one thing. I have a dear friend who's been in a long kind of somatic healing process and is a powerful practitioner herself. And she recently was doing some breath work with someone who was with her physically.
Mhm.
Um, and they realized that she had never really fully been inhaling properly. And this is a friend who's in her 50s, and it was like, oh, I'm supposed to feel it all the way here or all the way there. And so a lot of times we take for granted like the patterns that our body has been in and like how shallowly maybe we've been breathing our whole life, or like these certain patterns that our body is stuck in because of the life we've lived and how we've protected ourselves, or however we've been holding our posture. And so I think I just want to encourage people, if this is something you're kind of feeling led to check out, please do, because I think it's so powerful to find that bigger release in the body and like give our body the oxygen it needs, and to, all of that stuff. And it seems so simple, but I think that it can really have really profound impacts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I also want to mention, if you've got podcast listeners, and if
Yeah.
you are a podcast listener, you can hop on over and listen to my podcast,
Yeah.
Inside the Creative Process, where we talk about creative process.
Yeah.
So similar but different. Definitely,
Yeah.
we both serve similar but slightly different groups. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll make sure to include your links and all that stuff in the liner notes of the podcast. So if you're listening or if you're watching, you can check out all those great resources. They'll be available to you. Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that I wanted to mention too is like one of my favorite authors for mindful leadership is Mark Lesser. And he has this beautiful book, Seven Practices of a Mindful Leader. And he talks about how to use breath
Mhm.
as a leader, and how to hold space for others using breath just in a very simple ways, and like how to kind of like refocus a group when maybe you're all kind of like getting reactive in a team meeting or something, and how do you enter into the space of a team meeting, because we know we so often when we come into classes or we come into space, and you spoke to this a little bit too, like with your own choreography group, like how do you come into the space? And I feel like it's so important for us to learn how to make these sort of like transitions into working in different ways and being really clear about the goals, because we can just like, roll into a space and everybody starts talking and then pretty soon we're way off track. But he just talks about how we can do simple things like 3 breaths at the beginning of a session and at the end. Like, let's take a breath and let go of whatever was on our minds before we got here. Let's take a breath into our bodies and just allow ourselves to land in the space. And then let's take a breath out with all the hopes of what we want to accomplish today.
Mm.
Just simple little things like that that can help really change the feel of a space, get everybody focused, acknowledge that we're humans, and accomplish what we're there to do without it being like, some huge thing.
Yeah. And isn't that huge? Acknowledge that we're humans.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
In whatever space you're in.
Mhm. Right? Everywhere. We're all
We're
humans
all-
wherever we go.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I was just curious if there was anything else you wanted to say as like a last word or final message or anything for the artful leaders that are listening today.
Yeah, I think they've gotten a lot of tools about their breath. And I look forward to, I may not ever hear if anybody uses any of these tools, but I look forward to the possibility that breath will enter into a person's consciousness, at least for the next maybe 24 hours, and just explore just how often you even notice that you're breathing. My
Mhm.
mother used to hold her breath so
Mhm.
often. And so I
Mhm.
feel sometimes that I was given this breath work because of her, who she
Mhm.
passed away a few years ago. And it just feels like something that this is our life. This is life. So if we could just notice your breath.
Yeah. Yeah. It's your life force.
Mhm.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alicia, for hanging out with me a little bit today and sharing your practice and your creativity and these wonderful tools with us. I look forward to dancing with you again soon.
Yes, me too. Thank you, Rachelle.
All right. See you soon.